Hi, Mitch Argon with Calneva Realty. Welcome back for another episode of the Greater Reno Tahoe Real Estate Update. I'm going to take you through the market for May 2025 here in just a few minutes. Okay, let's get started. Just like in all prior months, I like to start off with the median price across the region. And you can see here it's a little bit of a mixed bag. We're up 10% Reno year over year for April. Most markets are in the single digits above or below zero. You'll see in just a moment that pricing is fairly stable. This gives you, like we do in all months, a little more detailed view that shows the trend line for each of the markets, which is useful to see that trend line. For the most part, these markets are generally flat in terms of pricing over the last couple of years. We'll take a little more detailed look here at one market in just a moment. Homes sold is a number that we're going to be looking at much more carefully in the coming months. You can see we're negative in three of the markets here, and we're up in three of the markets here. We are seeing a trend across the country, which I'll talk about a little bit later, on sales volume continuing to decline and what that's doing to pricing. Month supply of inventory. You can see here, while we're a little bit of a mixed bag, we're still very solidly in seller market territory. The highest one we have here is Tahoe, which is a unique market. That metric wouldn't apply quite as much. The more traditional primary owner occupier markets, you can see Carson Valley at 2.8, but the other markets hovering in and around 2 plus or minus, which is still solid seller market territory, no change there. Taking a look at inventory, you can see we're seeing some build here in the Reno and Sparks markets compared to May of last year, up 17 and 13% respectively. Carson City down quite a bit, and the other markets here a little bit of a mixed bag. But in general, we're seeing inventory build compared to where we were a year ago. And this shows housing units or inventory for sale by each city, so you can see what this trend looks like over the last couple of years. If you were to come through here and look at May at 520, for example, for Reno, that's right up in here. If you go back a year, we're at 443, so we're lower, and then a year earlier, we're even lower then. So we're seeing a general build as we work through the seasonality of inventory in the marketplace. We're seeing it generally climb. And again, a visual on the month's supply of inventory. This yellow shaded area, of course, is neutral market. 4 to 6 months of supply. As you can see, most of our markets are well below that. Carson Valley being a little bit higher than the others down in here. I don't have the Tahoe market on here, which would be up here in the 5 range. So again, fairly stable for now. I want to talk about a quick recap on something that we touched on a few months back, and that is what's happening. I'm seeing this in the news. I don't have any highly localized data to support it, but I'm seeing this in more news articles in my news feed. And this is about a national trend that has been developing now for maybe the last 6 to 8 months. And essentially what's happening is that there are selective pandemic boom markets, Texas, like Austin, Texas, San Antonio, Texas, most of Southeast Florida, the Atlanta market, for example, start to see some changes in their market where inventory levels were climbing and getting at or exceeding pre-pandemic levels. Much like we have also seen, sales volume has slowed, and that is starting to put some downward pressure on price in these markets. So we're seeing price correction based on growing inventory and slowing demand, if you will. Both of these things are directly related to affordability. Sellers don't want to list homes because they can't afford to buy another one at the current interest rates, or they don't like their exchange or buying power. So that's creating an issue with inventory. Sales volume being slow obviously is because people have a hard time affording homes at these interest rates and these prices. Now I'm coming back to revisit this because I've seen some new markets come onto the scene that weren't there before, that are much closer to where we are, and will have potentially some similar drivers to what we have, namely being very close to California, where we see a lot of migration out of California into these markets that are nearby. So Phoenix and Tucson have recently been added to this list that are beginning to experience this phenomenon that I just mentioned here: increasing inventory, slowing demand, and downward pressure on price, where markets are showing some negative price appreciation or price depreciation, in essence, beginning of what could be a price correction. So the question I have today for all of you, and I'm going to share a chart with you, is this trend developing into our market here? It is moving west. I would imagine that the next market that may be affected directly by this could potentially be Las Vegas, much closer to Phoenix than we are, and a much larger market. Could this affect our market here? So I thought I'd prepare a visual just to go through and do a quick recap on this overall phenomenon. And I'm using the Reno market as one example here. This is really the bellwether for our local market. It's the largest single market, and it typically is a leading indicator as to what's happening throughout our region on a broad basis. So this chart goes back to January of 2018, pre-pandemic, by a couple of years. It goes up to the current month of May this year, May of 2025. And I'm going to go through a couple of these lines and then talk about the correlations. You can see here is pricing, which was fairly stable through here up until the time the pandemic hit. Pandemic hit essentially in March is when we had the shutdown of 2020. You can see here from May, of 2020 until May of 2022, a 2-month period, pricing went up 53% over that 2-year period, the COVID bump. Since that time, and I touched on this in many of these videos, the pricing has been relatively flat. You've seen the price come down as we kind of had the interest rate sticker shock, and it very quickly corrected right back, and it's been a little low, a little high, but largely flat. If you look at this line from where we were at the peak in June of 2022 at 635, we've been up and around that number pretty consistently for the last 6 to 8 months at about the 635, 640, 650 range. That's the pricing story. And as you can see, we've been pretty stable there, and that pricing has remained elevated because of the lack of inventory in our marketplace, counterbalancing the lack of affordability. If we come down here and look at the blue line, which is inventory, you can see inventory levels back pre-pandemic are reaching 1,000. This is just Reno now. We're reaching 1,000 homes on the market at the peak of each market cycle, which is in the summer months. During COVID, of course, that went way down, right? We had this major inventory crunch. People weren't moving, people were buying. Inventory came way down. And post-COVID, you can see that it came back up into 2022, almost on a normal cycle. Rates went up, and now you see this inventory level suppressed down here, which is the result of this, what we call lock-in effect, where people are not putting homes in the market because their buying power is diminished with the higher interest rates if they buy a replacement home. So here we see the decrease in inventory. If we come back and we take a look at this red line, which is the number of homes sold, I have marked here with these little triangles May of each year for the number of homes sold. And without getting into any metrics, you can see that this volume went up slightly during the pandemic, stayed up, and has come down on a pretty consistent basis from back up in here down to where we are. We're probably down 25 to 35% lower in terms of sales volume now than we were perhaps at this peak time here at the early stage of the pandemic. So what these markets are seeing with decreasing price pressure, decreasing pricing, is they're seeing inventory building back up into pre-pandemic levels. So we're over here. Pre-pandemic, we were back up in here, okay? So these markets are seeing greater inventory levels than they saw pre-pandemic, which would be 18 and 19. We are still quite a bit below that where we are here, but there's potential for that to happen in our market as well. With that increasing in inventory, and you can see a decreasing in demand because of interest rates and affordability, they're starting to see some price correction. We are not seeing that in our market yet, but there is a potential that we could be seeing that around the corner based on this phenomenon moving west, like I just shared with you. So this chart is a little more detailed, a little smaller, but I want to go through this with you so you can understand this dynamic that is heading towards the west. I would consider our market as a pandemic boom market. And you can see here the pricing went up 53% during the COVID pandemic before interest rates started to rise. And so I don't think that we're necessarily immune from this phenomenon. but it has not yet hit us. That is it for this month. I hope this is good information for you. I hope it sheds some light on our local market and some of the trends that are happening on a national basis that could affect us, of course. If you have any questions regarding real estate, please feel free to reach out here from the YouTube channel or reply to an email that you may have received to get this video. Any one of our agents who you may be working with would be happy to help you answer any questions about the market or your specific situation, and then help you any way we can. The full report is down below the video. There's a link there if you want to look at the full report. That does not include the chart I just showed you. You'll have to look at the video for that and make it a full screen video. Until next month, thanks for watching. Hope this is useful, and I appreciate your time. Have a good rest of your day.